Good morning, everyone. We are on to the next session, session 8 of 9 for the Bible and evolution. And for today, the topic is truth preserved. This is the problem. It keeps on going back and forth. Maybe you can hold for me and keep pressing just this auto button. Okay, the top. Yeah, that's right. Just press once enough. Okay, so let me start with this thing about the DNA. Oops. Yeah, let me start with this thing about the DNA. Okay, our DNA is a molecule that carries your specific genetic materials. Okay, so this is a DNA. This whole strip, oh, that's turned off again. This whole strip is your DNA. All right, it is a molecule. So this is only one molecule, and it carries each person's specific genetic materials. You can see all these little things here. And then you have a gene. A gene is like a chain or a short section of the DNA. So there you have, this is one gene, just this section. And then there's a second section in the middle, and then there's a third section on the right-hand side. So there are 3 genes, just a short section of your DNA. And so your DNA and the gene, they play a very important role in the body as they instruct the body cells how to work and grow, as well as reproduction. Right? So that's what the gene is about, and the DNA. So here's another picture of it. The genome, okay? Now we talk about the genome. The genome is an entire set of DNA instructions found in a cell. Oh, it's back and forth again. Okay, so this is the cell. Yeah, and in humans, the genome consists of 23 pairs of chromosomes. What is a chromosome? A chromosome here, okay, here is a thread-like structure of nucleic acids and proteins found in the nucleus of most living cells. And it carries genetic information in the form of genes. So you get the 23 pairs of chromosomes. Yes, one set comes from the father and the other set comes from the mother. So each of them contributes 23 chromosomes. Okay, father 23, mother 23. And so you get your 23 pairs of chromosomes located in the cell's nucleus. Yeah, that's your nucleus here. Okay, as well as a small chromosome in the cell's mitochondria. So that's plural. Mitochondrion is one here. Okay, so that's a mitochondrial DNA. And a genome contains all the information needed for an individual to develop and function. Okay, so this one whole cell consists of your genome. That means your whole set of DNA instructions. It's quite amazing because just one cell itself has the whole set of DNA instructions. So DNA has codes in molecules lined up in a particular order. Okay, so all the codes are there in your molecules, the genes lined up in a particular order to write all the information needed, whether to build a dog or a cat or a person or whatever. Okay, so that's the DNA, and it is made up of all your genes sections. Okay, so in your cells, there's all the information needed to build you. Right? But here is the interesting thing that we need to understand when we talk about something like evolution or creation. Okay, but particularly when we talk about evolution. The interesting thing is you need to have the language to read the information. So you may have all your codes inside your DNA, all the molecules, right? But you need a language to read that information. And DNA has the information that makes that language. To read the information that makes the language to read the information that makes the language to read the information. Okay, so besides the information there, you actually need the language to be able to read the information. Okay, so it's like a machine. It's like a machine that you use to be able to read the information there. And both the information and the language all must be there, or this whole cell will not work. Okay, it all has to be there at the same time. Okay, so it has to be there and it has to be there at the same time. But here is the catch-22. Okay, languages only come when there is an intelligence. Somebody must be the creator of the language. Language doesn't happen accidentally by itself. Okay, correct? So you think of all the languages you know in the world, yeah, it has to come and it has to be useful because there is an intelligence that either creates it or uses it. So DNA cries out that there is an intelligence behind life. Okay, and so it couldn't have happened by chance or random processes. And that's the problem with evolution. Evolution depends on random chance. So if you depend only on random chance, there's no way you can get a language. And if there's no language, you cannot read the information on the DNA. Get the idea? Okay. So you can see that DNA in our genes is actually showing us that evolution is not possible. There has to be an intelligence to code all this information in your molecules. Okay, and that is the information needed to build you or anything that is a living thing. So DNA, in other words, it represents a language, a little bit like Morse code, right? In Morse code, if you're familiar, it makes use of dots, dash, and space, correct? Dots, dash, and space. So DNA has the hallmarks of language. Every tiny cell in our body is packed with 3 feet of DNA, or 3 billion nucleotides, similar to human language. DNA seems to represent a language, and that is the language of life, a testimony of the existence of the creator of life. And 1 Timothy 6:13 tells us that God gives life to all things. Okay, so here is an example, a drawing of your DNA, right? So one segment is actually your genes. Okay, so you have all the codes there, and these are all the molecules, all the molecules with all the codes inside your DNA. And here's a picture of what it looks like. Okay, so DNA represents a language, and this is something that only an intelligence can be responsible for. And so that is actually telling us that it is God that is responsible for life, not random chance, such as evolution. So we have the non-living matter, right? Non-living matter, that means non-living things, cannot produce one single bit of information that is found in the DNA of living things. Now, information scientist, this man called Dr. Werner Gitt, wrote a book called In the Beginning Was Information. That's the cover of one of the publications. And he said, there is no known law of nature, no known process with all the steps, and no known sequence of events, things that happen, which can cause information to originate by itself in matter. So in other words, what it's saying is, when we talk about the Big Bang out of a non-living thing, it is actually not possible, okay, to create information by itself. Because it's a non-living thing, it cannot create a single bit of information. Okay, so that already shows right from the very beginning the process of Big Bang, all these things turning into life, if the primordial soup basically, right? That one, all is impossible. So he also said, a code system is always the result of a mental process. Mental process, that means it needs an intelligent origin or inventor. Matter, non-living thing as such, is unable to generate any code. All experiences indicate that a thinking being voluntarily exercising his own free will, cognition, right, the ability to think and reason and creativity is required. So we see that DNA is an information system that cannot have come out of matter on its own. It's absolutely impossible. And so evolution from non-living matter cannot possibly have happened. Okay. So that is the beginning part. Then we also learn from the secularist who says the origin of the domestic dog from wolves has been established. Okay, here we are talking about the animals that supposedly have evolved, right? But the secularist tells us that actually domestic dogs came from wolves, even though now we see them as different, wolves and domestic dogs. So they examined the mitochondrial DNA sequence variation among 654 domestic dogs, representing all major dog populations worldwide, suggesting a common origin from a single gene pool for all dog populations. And this is not evolution. Okay, so all the dog species we have actually came from wolves, and that is not the kind of macro evolution we are talking about. Remember the term macro? Macro means one kind of animal, like for example, a frog evolves into a fish or evolves into a lizard. Okay, so this is not the evolution that people are talking about. Evolution, oh, sorry. Sorry, have to be a bit patient, people on the Zoom, because there's a problem with the projector here. Evolution is more about adding more new information. Example, reptiles have the information in their DNA for scales, yeah, but they don't have the information for how to build a feather, which is a very complex structure, in order to evolve into a bird. It also must have information to evolve into all the other characteristics of a bird as well. Okay, so that means it really needs a lot of information, for example, a reptile to evolve into a bird. The changes that take place are actually variations, right, within the kind of animal. The changes that take place, for example, from a wolf to a dog, there's actually variations. It's not the evolution of one kind of animal into another. Okay, so we have this new word now today called variations. where the babies look different from the parents they come from. And I've given you two pictures of human beings, right? Two families. The first picture on the left, you can see that the woman is I hope it's not offensive to use the word, the term black woman, and then the man is not a black woman. And you can see the children they have. The children kind of like have a complexion that is kind of in the middle between the two parents. Okay, so that is a variation. In this case, they don't look like the mother and they don't look like the father. They are variations. Same for this other family on the right-hand side. You have now got a white woman, and the man, I don't think he's a black. He's probably a minority race of some other kind. But you can look at the children. There's a girl right on the man's lap that looks like she's also white skin, like the mother. Okay, and then the other three children, they seem to have a variation, not a white skin, and perhaps not exactly like the father either in terms of the skin complexion, right? Okay, so you can see that the babies that come from the parents, they have different looks, not because of evolution, but because of variations. So looking at the Darwinian evolution, right, where it changes from one animal to another, for that to be true, you need to keep seeing new information being added. Yeah, you need to have zillions of new information in your genes to be added for it to change from this animal into another kind of animal. And what we actually observe in science is information being lost or rearranged, not added. Take, for example, okay, so you have this pair of parents, these two wolves here, and you can see the one wolf here is capital A and small a. Can you see? And the capital B and small b, and the capital C and small c. And then the other partner also capital A and small a, capital B and small b, capital C and small c. Now, when they have offspring, they could have different variations of the genes that are combined. And you can see that the information is not exactly the same as the parents, right? So this dot on the left, you have capital A, small a, but you have capital B, and capital C, small c. Whereas this dot in the middle has all capitals. And this dot on the right-hand side has got capital A, capital B, small b, capital C, small c. So if we go by all these genes, right, and the contribution of the chromosomes from the parents, we can have a lot of variations, yeah, for the next generation. And then the next generation, for their next generation, can also have a lot of variations. So far, it doesn't have any new information. Yeah, all the information is actually from the parents. Okay, you don't have a D popping up in the genes, right? It's all A, B, C, and it's a combination of the information. There's no new information like a D or an E gene coming up, correct? And you compare the DNA combination of the offspring to their parents, right? And the combination of information can give rise to different species of dog. So there you go, okay? Something like wolf could in time evolve into combinations in different species with all the generations that go. So in terms of Noah's Ark, there needed to be actually only 2 dogs, yeah, which is one kind of animal. We don't need to have all the different species of dogs. But as they left the ark, all right, and then they multiplied and they split up to live in different parts of the world. So you can have, let's say, a pair of original from the ark, Okay, looking at the diagram, a pair of original from the up, when they reproduce, and then all these, they separate into all the different parts of the world. They form different groups and even species as the combinations of the genes, okay, combinations are being formed. So along the way, they redistribute, you know, the capital A and the capital B, the small a and the small b, and so on. Okay, they redistribute or they lose the information. And this is the opposite of evolution, where they need to add new information like a D gene or an E gene or an F gene, for example, from scales to change to feathers, right? It's a different gene. You cannot have scales genes to suddenly give birth to feathers genes. You need some kind of new information like a D or E or F or G, yeah, to become another kind of animal. So what takes place is actually natural selection, adaptation, and another term called speciation. That means forming different species. And these are the opposite of evolution. They are actually against evolution. Okay, so we have a picture here, for example, starting with this pair of parent dogs. Okay, you have the S and L gene in the mother, and then you have the S and L gene, the blue one, in the father. Okay, S for short hair and L for long hair, the gene. Okay, so in this case, they produce the two S's, capital S genes, yeah, short hair, or in another case, they could have offspring where they have two L's, long hair genes, or they could have one that is one S and one L, which is medium hair genes. Okay, one short and one long combined together, and they can produce middle hair genes, medium hair. So talking about the first picture, this pair of parents has offspring that inherits the short hair gene from both parents. It looks different, but it's not new information. It's a matter of combination. Yeah. And then for these two other pictures on the right-hand side, the different look in offspring, you see the LL one, that means the hair is long, and then the SL, the hair is medium, okay? It's actually a different combination of what they get from the parents. It's not new information, and it's not a different type of animal, okay? So the information in the three offspring is different, but it's not new, because the information is already in the parents. It's just a new combination. So, following this principle, if let's say some dogs move towards cold climate, okay, a colder place. So what happens? Those with short hair, the SS, and the medium hair, SL, they get cold, they can't stand it, and they die. So there you go, the SS and the SL, they are buried, leaving only the LL dog. And these are dogs with long hair. And these dogs with long genes will only produce dogs with long hair genes. So they form a different species of dog with long hair when you go to a cold climate. Now, if they move to a hot climate, what happens? We still have the same three kinds of dogs moving to a hot climate. Those with long hair and medium hair, they overheat and they die, leaving only the short hair. So now you are left with only dogs with S genes, short hair genes will only be able to produce dogs with S genes. So according to the climate and environment that they live, they migrate to, they will by natural selection and speciation, they will start producing their own characteristics and their own species of dogs over time. Okay, so over time, through natural selection and adaptation, long hair, if they need to adapt so that they have short hair because of the climate, then they will adapt. So what happens is you can form all these distinct species of dogs, but they are still 100% dogs. And they came from the original gene pool, right? So that is how we can have different species, but they are all the same kind of animal. So, from the perspective of Darwinian evolution, you supposedly start with non-living matter with no information, right? If we are following evolution. Over time, matter has to give rise to massive amounts of information, zillions of bits of information. You need to have your D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K genes, right, of information for all the information to build all the different kinds of animals. So if that's the case, excuse me, we should see increasing information all the time to build all the different kinds of animals and plants. If you talk about evolution, yeah, where something new has to be added, yeah. But as we said already just now, actually what we observe, what science observes is a loss of information or redistribution of information. If it's exactly what the Bible would tell us, every kind of animal has its own kind. Yeah, every animal is its own kind. All the information is already there. It doesn't need to have new information to evolve into a different animal. So when we form different species, they have less information overall than the original, which means it's the opposite of evolution. This is evidence against evolution, and yet, ironically, is taught as evidence for evolution. You see how the thinking is actually twisted in the opposite direction. Yeah. So this picture at the bottom in the middle, matter from non-living world cannot possibly turn into matter from living world because the genes, they do not have the information to produce life and then produce the different kinds of genes needed for different kinds of animals, whether it's a reptile with scales or birds with feathers and so on. So then you realize Noah didn't need anywhere near the number of animals on the ark that people think he did, right? You don't need so many species. That means you cut down on a lot of animals or cut down on a different species of dogs, or you only need 2 dogs. And you don't need all the different kinds of elephants. You don't need African elephant, Indian elephant, mastodons, woolly mammoths. You see, you don't need all the different variations. You only need 2 of the elephant kind. And as they leave the ark and travel across the world to settle down, they will adapt and naturally select how they will become Indian elephant, African elephant, and so on. Okay, so that's where over time, when they leave the ark, you end up with different species forming from them, but they all, like I showed you just now with the dogs, they all came from the original gene pool. Okay, so there you go. The Christian faith is not a blind faith. It is based on the God who created the world, as well as the science that governs how the world operates. Okay, so on the Ark of Noah, you only need 2 of each kind. You don't need each of two of each species. Kind, not species. So there is no genetic mutation or evolution if you talk about mutation. Okay, so we are clear on genes, right? So we go on next to genetic mutation. That's another area where where evolution supporters will say, oh, okay, fine. If not the original genes, then genetic mutation. The genes mutate, then evolve, okay? But there is no genetic mutation or evolutionary process that can be seen in the natural world to increase the information in the genome. Remember, the genome is the whole, all the DNA information in one cell, okay? In one cell, there is no increase at all. So you have a picture here of the chromosomes. They're supposed to be 23, okay, with one X, one Y, representing from father and mother. Okay, in this case, if there's a Y, the presence of the Y chromosome shows that this is a male. Okay, so all the genetic material contained in an organism's DNA is the genome. Okay, so the signs of genetic mutation that does not support evolution. Let's take a look and see this improbability and impossibility of evolution by random mutations and natural selection. Okay, so they're saying, yeah, natural selection, but also random mutations. Okay, so that means long hair will die and short hair will come up if it is hot climate. Okay, natural selection. But actually, natural selection is only a conserving mechanism. Okay, it conserves whatever is there. It doesn't create more information. It simply preserves what is already there. And varieties within species today actually represent a loss of genetic information, but macroevolution requires an increase. Like I said, from reptile to a bird, you need to increase information for forming feathers from a reptile. Okay, so Darwin observed the finches. That is the adaptation or natural selection. Okay, because basically the beak that he saw in finches, they just naturally select to form the different kinds of beaks because of the way they feed, the kind of diet they eat. Okay, but at the end of the day, a finch is a finch, a bird is a bird. It doesn't become a lizard. Yeah, so this is the result of natural selection. Look at the picture on the right. There are changes in the inherited characteristics of a population. And these changes increase a species' fitness in its environment. Okay, so the changes actually helps the species to survive better in the environment. And these changes of natural selection acts on the populations, not individuals, but it is populations that evolve over time. Okay, so the whole real issue of evolution, which is how do you come to have horses and tigers and things, is impossible. Changing from one kind of animal to another, that is impossible. Evolution contradicts the law of information, just now as we saw in Dr. Werner Gitt, because there can be no information if there is no intelligent source of information. That means there must be a creator, somebody like God. So all known mutations, example, nowadays we talk about so many viruses. Example, superbug mutations and natural selection. Example, population shifts towards light color or dark color. Big beak or small beak. All this involves a loss of pre-existing information. While creationists refute evolution, all creationists believe in natural selection as it merely selects pre-existing information. It does not create new information. Yet, massive amounts of new information are required to make new species or new kinds. There has not been one observable instance of new information being added to the genome, and that's a major problem for evolutionists. Okay, new information to make new kinds of animals. Okay, so this is a picture that supposedly that is from the Chernobyl radiation. Okay, and these are the firebugs, and this is what we call mutation. If you look at them, you can see that they're not all very normal, right? Like for example, the first one, the first feeler here is missing. Yeah, and down here you can see the feelers of all the different mutations. They are very they're not normal. Okay, and the parts of their bodies as well. So that's what happens if natural selection cannot create more information. What does? The argument that mutations are the mechanism for evolution is equally void of scientific evidence. No scientific evidence. First of all, mutations are relatively rare. Okay, you don't come across mutations every day. Yeah, they're very rare, and more importantly, when they do occur, they are almost always harmful to the organism, not beneficial. For example, look at this picture, right? Picture of this calf. It has two heads. Yeah, are the two heads better than one head? Okay, so the two heads don't benefit it in any way. It doesn't like become able to fly or become able to swim, okay, or be able to behave something different, like a different kind of animal. So famous French zoologist and evolutionist Pierre-Paul Grass puts it this way: mutations in time occur incoherently. They are not consistent. They are not fixed. They are not complementary either to one another, nor are they cumulative. They don't add up more and more in successive generations toward a given direction. You know, they don't add up to say, okay, from a scale of a reptile, they don't add up to consistently producing feathers for birds. They don't. One day they can produce funny thing, another day some other funny thing. Okay, they don't all follow the same pattern when they mutate, and they modify what pre-exists. Okay, so here's the important thing. When they mutate, they don't mutate into something new. They mutate from something that is already there. Okay, can you see? So that is why this calf can have two heads, and the two heads are still the heads of a calf. It's not like one head of a bird and one head of a calf. Okay, it doesn't have new information where one is the features or characteristics of a different kind of animal, while one retains. So we cannot have a mutation from a reptile and into half a reptile and half a bird. We cannot. It can only mutate what is already there. That means whatever is reptile, or in this case a calf, it can only mutate certain parts of what is already calf. And it doesn't help, okay? They modify what pre-exists, but they do so in disorder. Yeah, there's no consistent order. So for example, this one, five-legged calf. Yeah, so there's a mutation. Yeah, and this calf was born in 1997 on an Iowa farm. It was really strange when I first saw it. The owner said, but the fifth leg didn't seem to bother the calf. In fact, the calf was normal in every way, except for this strange fifth leg. We see that animals with extra legs may be rare, but they are certainly not unheard of. Whether you talk about flies or frogs or cows, such curiosities result from mutations or mistakes, if you want simple English, in the animal's inherited genes, or from defects during development. Okay, so to put it more clearly, they're actually defects. They don't help in any way to evolve into a different kind of animal. So basically what happens is that information in the genes is activated twice. That's why you have two heads. The information or the genes for the head is activated twice. And so basically no new information is added. It doesn't have information for feathers. These animals already had the information to make a leg. Or in the case of the first calf, the information to make a head. A mistake in their genes just made an extra one in the wrong place. Animals like these are good examples of the limits of mutations and the problems with evolution. So you see all the mutations, you talk about the X-Men, they're supposed to be mutants. Such things don't happen in real life, okay? Yeah, such things don't happen in real life. There are limits of mutations. Nevertheless, enthusiastic evolution promoters have misused examples of animals with extra legs, and they call that evidence for how totally new body parts could evolve. Okay, here is a third calf with a leg up here like that. Okay, they call it evidence of evolution, but remember, this is not evolution because what is produced already is in the genes. It's not a different kind of animal part. Yeah. Okay, so their arguments sidetrack the issue from the real question. Was real information created? There's no real information. This fifth leg is still the genetic material of the four legs, same as the four legs of the original calf. It is not something new, okay? Rather than a big change. Oh, you see big change here, so that's evolution taking place. No, that is the wrong thing to be sidetracked by. Okay, and this calf here in this case was in Jamapo in November 2020. So an extra leg is a big change, but it's not new information, and you just can't get around the issue. It takes lots of new information to change a dinosaur to a bird or a leg to change into a wing. Okay, so keep in mind that these extra legs usually they don't help the animal. See this poor calf here, extra leg on the head like a decoration. Yeah, happily for the calf, the leg didn't get in the way. Many animals find their extra legs a hindrance. It doesn't help at all. And a five-legged calf may be quite a curiosity, but it has nothing to do with evolution. So you talk in terms of the issues of functionality, how it's used, and more importantly of information. They are both major problems to evolution because they cannot be used. But they are no problem at all if you look at the biblical view of the world. Yeah, we don't need to evolve and have all these extra parts. So we see no examples of new forms evolving in our world today as a result of natural selection and random mutations. We do see many varieties being formed within existing species, both naturally and artificially. But again, this is due to a loss of genetic information. Okay, so now we know something about science. Okay, for evolution to take place, we basically need a lot of extra information in the genes. But in real life, it is loss of information or rearrangement. It is not new information. Clearly, what we see, right? No examples of transitionary forms in our world today. Nothing that shows this animal is becoming a different kind of animal. The only logical alternative to evolution by natural selection and random mutations, the only logical alternative is special creation. God already made them what they are. They don't need to mutate, or they don't need to evolve, macro-evolve into some new animal. So in terms of paleontology, the fossil records, yeah, biology offers no examples of transitionary forms today. Yeah, no living thing, whether plant or animal, there's no evolutionary form today that we can observe. When we examine the fossil record, we discover that the missing links are still missing. Although the evolutionists are reluctant to admit this, in moments of honesty, they will confess that the fossil record is full of gaps. Okay? All paleontologists know that the fossil record contains little in the way of so-called intermediate forms, where the transitions between major groups, yeah, they are characteristically abrupt. There's no something that is between, let's say, a frog and a mammal. Okay, there's nothing in between. So all the missing links, they are still missing. For example, there's no trace in evolutionary links between the invertebrates. Invertebrates means they don't have backbones, and the vertebrates. Example from sponges, trilobites, jellyfish, sea worms, all these don't have backbones. There's no evolutionary link for them to become fishes, which have backbones, right? If evolution is true, there should be a lot of intermediate forms in between, transiting from no backbone to backbone, but no fossil records exist. Neither is there any fossil evidence for the evolution from fish to amphibians. Yeah. Example, no forms with pad feet and pad fins. Yeah, amphibians, they have feet like frogs, and fish have fins. There's no evolutionary forms that have a partly fin and partly feet. None has ever been found, except of course for artist drawings in textbooks and museums all over the world. All these are drawings. Since the fossil record provides no evidence of other aspects of the transformation from fish to tetrapod. Tetrapod means they have legs, 4 legs. Yeah. Paleontologists have had to speculate. That is not science. Speculate how legs and aerial breathing evolved. How do fish in water start having legs and then start breathing in air on the land? Yeah, they don't have any evidence, so they just come up with their own theories and speculate. But that's not science, huh? Speculation. There are also no missing links in the fossil record in man's evolutionary development from reptile to mammal. Mammal. Okay, right. So basically, there are plenty of actual fossils, but the evidence of transitionary fossil records from, let's say, invertebrates to vertebrates, or fish to amphibians, or fish to tetrapod, or reptile to mammal, evidence of these transitional fossil records, they are missing. They are always drawings, not actual fossils. So you look at it, transitional fossils, all the alleged transitional fossils that were so dear to the hearts of evolutionists a generation ago, they are now an embarrassment to them. Archaeopteryx, okay, they said that Archaeopteryx was a dinosaur that was in between dinosaur and bird, is now considered pure bird and not an intermediate fossil. Okay, it's a pure bird. It's not in between dinosaur and bird. And then you have the famous horse series. You know, they have the drawings of the horse. You can see the picture down there. A small, tiny animal, okay, that evolves into a bigger until finally it becomes a horse that we have. The famous horse series that is still found in some textbooks and museums has been discarded and is considered a phantom and illusion because it is not proof of evolution. The point It takes billions of changes of information in the DNA genome for one kind of animal to evolve into another kind. This is impossible unless there is a designer or somebody intelligent to code that information into the DNA. Remember just now we said for the DNA to operate, there must be the information with the language for it to work. Okay, the information with the language to work. And the language is actually sign of intelligence. Okay, so we have something interesting here. This coelacanth fish, yeah, was touted to be a transitional form. So that means in between, with a half-formed legs and primitive lungs, ready to transition onto land. So it's supposed to be a fish with legs, so that, you know, the fins will drop off and then the legs will develop, and then it becomes something that can live on land and walk on land. Now, this myth was exploded in December 1938 when a live coelacanth was caught in a fisherman's net off the eastern coast of South Africa. It is now known that the natives of the Comoro Islands had been catching and eating the fish for years. It did not have half-formed legs or primitive lungs. It was simply a regular fish that people thought was extinct and thought was a transitional form. But no, up to today, coelacanth is still around. It's still a fish. Here's a photograph of it with scientists. Yes, evolutionists claimed the 350 million-year-old coelacanth evolved into animals with legs, feet, and lungs. The coelacanth is a star witness against the false theory of evolution. After so-called 350 million years, remember, we know that that is not accurate. Huh? The fish still doesn't have a leg to stand on. Yeah, it's still a fish with fins and no legs up to today. Yeah, so it doesn't support what evolutionists were thinking. You actually do have types of fish with legs, but they are still fish with legs. They don't evolve. So how many fossils, or there are photos of actual fossils that show the transitional stages of evolution from one kind of life form to another, has anybody ever seen? Yeah, who has seen in between fossils? And answer is none. Yeah, answer is none. There's actually no proof of evolution. How scientists give the impression that evolution actually takes place? Oh, there are these three little ways, all right, three little tricks to can I say, cheat people? They produce same type fossils, adaptations. Remember the finches with different kinds of beaks, and then they say that is evolution. Or they draw pictures, okay, that supposedly the beak start evolving, become lips of some kind of mammal. Okay, so they draw pictures, or else they show adaptations of the same kind of animal, and they call that evolution. If it is evolution, it is only micro evolution. Okay. Or second way is they create a story or theory for a fossil, and then they tell you, okay, how this fossil will evolve, and they make up a story, and then they boldly call it proof of evolution having taken place. You see, they take one fossil, they come up with a story, or they, next week we will look at the most important fossil, so-called man. Okay, next week we look at a fossil of man, and they create whole story around man, or they create whole story about monkeys, and then they say, see, proof of evolution. Or the third way is they actually force fit two different fossils based on some similarity. And last week we did see that when we were talking about that fish that looks like a dolphin. Yeah, the fish that looks like a dolphin. Yeah, that was a fish. Remember the fish that was giving birth life when there was a rapid burial. okay? And so they force fit two different fossils based on some similarity because they both look kind of like the same. And they call that an proof of evolutionary transitional link. So these are the methods that scientists, so-called evolutionists, give to create the impression that evolution is real, but actually these are tricks. Okay, so once again, plenty of actual fossils, but evidence of fossil records are always either adaptations. Here you can see the animal, same kind, is actually adapting through natural selection, but not actual macroevolution. Or they just give us drawings like this case. Yeah, wow, how from the very small little thing down there, they can evolve into all the way up to all these complex animals and human beings. They'll always give you drawings, no actual fossil records. Okay, so hypothesis or fact? Oh, sorry. Hypothesis or fact? Why is it that evolutionists are unwilling to allow for competing models like creation or intelligent design? Why do they keep insisting? Well, the hypothesis of evolution changes every so often. If one theory is said to be fact, but then a year later or sometime later is shown to be wrong, yeah, when they discover that, for example, the Archaeopteryx supposed to be a fact of evidence between bird and dinosaur, okay, then later on it's discovered to be wrong, then how can it be claimed fact in the first place? A true fact is something that never changes. In contrast, the truth of God does not change even with time. In fact, time enables more aspects of the truth to be affirmed and seen in new light. Okay, yeah. So evolution or creation, which looks real and which is the real thing? Yeah, evolution seems to give us the impression that it's real, but is it the real thing? Just like this picture here, I put it in this way, not the normal way, so that you have to decide which is real and which is not which is the one that looks real. Yeah, okay. I'm not telling you which is real and which looks real, but it's not the real thing. So that's the thing about evolution. Oh, sorry. Okay, so God's truth preserved. We don't have evidence of observational signs. Yeah, that's what science is about, observing, right? Repeatable experiments, repeatable things that we can observe. We do not have evidence of observational signs to verify both creation and evolution. We don't have observational information. But we do have the historical signs. That means it happened as events or as history. We do have historical science evidence of the global flood in fossils. For example, we have explored the death pose mystery. We have explored soft tissue, right, with the presence of blood cells in so-called ancient dinosaur bones. We have seen polystrate fossils. They cut tree trunks that are across so-called different layers of ages. Yeah, but following what we know, it's not. Okay, coal, we have seen the observational signs, evidence of mounts and helens, and all these verify the quick formation of strata layers, canyons, river systems that support the idea of a young Earth due to a global flood. Okay, so we may not have the observational signs for creation and evolution themselves, but we do have observational signs that shows all these things supposedly millions and billions of years ago actually took place in a very short time. That gives us the idea of a young Earth due to something similar to St. Helens, but this time is on a global scale, the global flood. And now we have the observational signs, evidence of the DNA in cells, pointing us to an intelligence that created a language of life for life itself. All this is now observational signs, And we see that God's truth is preserved all over the world in these and more. All right, so we have pictures that you're familiar with that remind us of what we have explored over a number of sessions. So people ask questions about God, about creation, where we come from, science and the role of science, evolution, life, what's the meaning of life, and even global flood. People ask questions. We can answer many of them actually. Yeah, the answers are based in God's Bible. It is true. The problem is whether we are prepared to accept them. Having answers also mean we have to accept that God has to say to us, accept what God has to say to us about our lives. Because everything comes together. You see, for science, no. But for us, what we see is everything comes together and points us to God's message and God's will for us. Right? Okay. And what is that? It is all no accident or random chance, like evolution and naturalism suggest. Remember, naturalism says it's just natural, no interference of any intelligence, and it just takes time and random. Our lives and existence have a God-created purpose, which some evolutionists will reject, but thankfully some they allow themselves to be convinced. Okay, but those reject because they would rather reject God and his plans to depend on their own human transient, that means very temporary and short-term intelligences in this world. Consider which makes more sense. To take heed of the numerous evidence and threads of fossils, DNA in our bodies, and so on, that come together to convey a consistent message? Or does it make sense to ignore everything as random chance? Even coincidence has a level when you have to stop calling it coincidence. Yeah, even coincidence comes to a point where you cannot call it coincidence anymore. Okay, so if you can see this slide is a little bit different because you will see that. Can you see what the slide is? All the white stuff. Okay, all the white stuff is actually forming the shape of a human face. You have the eyes here, okay, going down, and then this is the part of the nose, and then you have the mouth and the chin here. I'm trying to use this picture to suggest that there's a coming together of all the evidence and they form some picture telling us something, and that something is God with his message for us. Okay, so God's truth set in stone, and the stones of fossils actually cry out. God began creation with a miracle which evolution scientists refuse to accept. Okay, so they say God with creation is a miracle and that's not scientific. But they accept evolution, which ironically assumes a miracle in the beginning. Yes, and what's more, it's an unscientific miracle that all life began with a non-living particle. Remember, no DNA, no information coded inside the cells, that undergoes a big bang and that then produces life after a few billion years. So they are making assumption that the DNA code actually starts happening by itself, right? And we have explored that it's not possible. And even if they talk about mutation, we have also seen that mutation is not helpful and is not purposeful. Yeah. After creation, okay, what makes sense is God created with a miracle, true, but evolution is also a miracle, but unscientific. After creation, God allowed the natural scientific processes of uniformitarianism. So God allows uniformitarian to govern the rate of growth and development with the two lights. If you remember in Genesis chapter 1, God created two lights, one bigger like the sun and smaller like the moon. That chapter 1 verse 14, let these two lights serve as let me see. Let these two lights serve as signs to mark seasons and days and years. Okay, so there you go again, to mark seasons, days, and years. So here it's very clear the Bible actually says when God created sun and moon, mark days and years. So it cannot be there was one time when the days were millions of years ago. Okay, the sun cannot be so weird. One period of time, one day is billions of years or millions of years. Another time suddenly it became 24 hours. So there you go, another evidence, young Earth, right? Otherwise, the story is inconsistent, and we cannot put inconsistency into God's consistent Bible. Okay, let's not spoil it by trying to fit in evolution, whether for Christians or for non-Christians, evolutionists. Okay, so God, after creation, allowed the natural processes of uniformitarianism to govern the rate of growth and development with the two lights, and this enables men to rationally and reasonably use the laws of science to live and progress. So the question, eat, survive, and reproduce, eat, survive, and reproduce, what is it all about? So in time, after God let uniformitarianism take its place, in time, God sent a catastrophic global flood as a statement of his judgment on man's sin. There's the flood of Noah. It is a statement of God's judgment. We may say that catastrophe and then the rainbow given by God after that are a means God uses to speak of his existence, his presence, and his relationship with men, which people under science, they refuse to acknowledge and they choose to ignore. And that is a reminder that he has a covenant with us, that's the rainbow, and a means of speaking out against human sinful life. In the case of that catastrophe, which can bring sudden death, so carefully consider how we live and spend our lives. Okay, God has a means to speak out against human sinful life, and yet also give us a promise and assurance that there is hope for life to be rejuvenated and restored. And that's why we see, for example, Mount St. Helens, after a certain number of years, all the life is coming back to that place. God still gives us promise and assurance that life can still come back. But his basic speaking and message to us about judgment of sinful life still remains. In the time of catastrophe, the gradual process of uniformitarianism is temporarily disrupted, and transformation is again speeded up. Okay, then the natural processes of gradualism return for man to once again use the laws of science to live and progress. So God has left evidence of what he has done in the billions of fossils set in stone. Yeah, fossils are actually a form of stone. All over the planet, God's truth in stones, and the stones are crying out to us. It is God's statement that he is not done with men, is not done with us yet. Okay, so if supporters of evolution are open and honest, they will realize that the truth of evolution is that it keeps getting disproved. They come out with some new evolutionary thing that is not actually consistent with science. It will be disproved. It's a matter of time, but then it's also a matter of human honesty. You know, whether we also realize from what happens in the world, whether after it's disproved, people are honest, or do they try to suppress? Do they try to suppress the truth? Like this, they fire creation scientists, right? So evolutionists have to keep looking for new solutions, proof, and explanations. We see phenomena in the physical world around us that scientists try to explain in scientific nuts and bolts. So they say, this chemical took place, changes, or this energy formed here, there, and all the interactions. Even though it can be true, right? Can be true, such truth is only part of the picture. It is incomplete because you're just looking at technical things. Yeah. But beyond the technical things, truth that is complete ties all the relevant factors together. Besides technical truth, for example, we talk about aeroplane crashes. We don't just look at technical truth. We also look at something called human error, right? We also look at human error. So truth that is complete will tie all the relevant factors together. And that includes the physical occurrences we see in the world around us. Those are the technical things. But then also what happened that led us to see, and the unseen human elements, the human error that explains why these things happen. Not just the technical science of why, but the human element of why. That is where truth ties everything together. And that is the true missing link that scientists miss, God's absolute truth. And that is the thing that we will explore next week, okay? And round off session 9 of 9, the missing link. So for today, this is where we are at, okay? Creation and evolution. Which is the real fact and which gives the appearance of fact, but it's actually fake. So I've now given you that same picture again, okay, except that now it is, I put it in a confusing way so that one is inverted and one is on the right direction. Okay, so you go and enjoy yourself, having a good time, trying to figure out which is the real thing and which is just a picture of the real thing. Shall we pray? Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you once again for your word to us that is so marvelously consistent, and it may not be scientific in the way it is written, but it certainly is consistent with science when we use science to discover our world, to understand our world, and then we look back into the Bible to use your Bible, which is absolute truth, to make sense of the science that we have and to make sense of the world that we live in. We thank you, Lord, for your goodness to us in so many ways, your provision for us so that we know we can have faith in you because you are true, you are truth, you're trustworthy, and you are real. You're not a figment of our imagination. And we thank you, Lord, that you have given to us all the things needed to tell us how to live on earth through science, using science, and also how to live it in a way that would make our life purposeful and directed in a specific direction for your plan for us. We thank you and praise you for your goodness and all that you have done for our benefit. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.